And the Georgia Justice Project, I had always seen as a group, and they knew that I had had a legal aid background, so we talked and stuff when they would come by the courthouse. Tried to do something different, tried to look at the individual and take the time and kind of analyze what needed to be done and take that initiative on themselves, where most attorneys who even want to do that, and there's plenty of attorneys who try, but it's a promise of what's going to come tomorrow. If you'll give my guy, instead of 5 years in jail, if you give him 1 year in jail and 5 years in probation, then he'll do X, Y, and Z. But the Georgia Justice Project would come in and say, he's already done X and Y. So if you'll just give him the probation, you'll see that he'll do, the Z as well. So it was something that was already begun. It was a process where what the client needed was being done by them. It wasn't waiting on the system to find a way to do it and just saying, hey, system, if you try to do it, this is the way we can work it out. So I had always seen that as a really positive way to look at the system. So you try to figure that out. You try to figure out how can you make a change in the system, knowing that the system can't change in reality. I think the Peace Corps was really good for that. The Peace Corps was very clear that they worked on a 10-year project, that from the day you arrived to the day you leave, you really wouldn't see much change. But had you come the first day, you came the last day, you would see a significant amount of change. And I think slowly over time, that's what can happen. Getting judges to expect more from attorneys, getting clients to expect more from attorneys, getting the DA's office to expect more, reminding the DA's office, even though they do a really good job of it, I don't think they get enough credit of recognizing that they do justice and that they don't, they do their best to really try not to just churn people through, but to do the right thing. That individuals are what we're dealing with. And as a prosecutor, it became clear that what I did was, at the end of a crime, put a Band-Aid on it. And the issue was there a way to figure out, in doing homicide cases, where these two families wouldn't be ruined? Well, even if I went in the courtroom and did my job and did it effectively, one family was extremely thankful. And there's nothing like that feeling of a family, telling you that they feel whole again almost because of what you've done. But then there's another family across the courtroom who's now lost a child. So it didn't do anything in reality. So is there a way to go back? Is there a way to intervene early on, where hopefully people won't have these problems, where those two families are never destroyed because earlier on somebody intervenes and somebody helps people trying to identify why are you in the system. No one's confused. I don't think anybody's confused that the root cause of most crime is poverty. You can look at it, you can look at crime statistics in any city, see where the heaviest parts are, and that's where the poverty areas are. So that attempt to identify people, to help people identify those problems and let them try to solve those problems. If it's an educational issue, then let's see what we can do to push you on that goal. If it's a drug problem, then how can we get that looked into? So hopefully these people won't end up with their lives destroyed or someone else's lives destroyed later. So I think that was the overall, the process of seeing what can be done, seeing how things aren't done effectively, and then trying to figure out what can be done to make a difference. And I think Georgia Justice Project is one of the few groups that's really trying to do that. It's a big, difference. Even as a prosecutor, I was still a government employee, but for what I did, I was paid well. And I took a little bit more than a 25% pay cut to come here. And that was something my wife and I had to spend a lot of time trying to figure out about and to talk to my kids about. I have twin boys who are 9 now, and I remember when they were 3 or 4, they were watching an episode of the Super Friends. I think that we had gotten them on DVD of the old Super Friends shows, and they saw that it was the Justice League, and one of them said, "Daddy, that's kind of what you do. You're like, in the Justice League." And that's like, I mean, that's okay. I'm doing this for the rest of my life. My kid thinks I'm a superhero. But then, when you make that transition of sitting down and talking to them, for them to kind of understand, okay, I'm changing that. I'm not doing that anymore. And I'm going to be trying to help people based on this. And you honestly tell them, and that means we're not going to be able to do as much as we did before. We're not going to have as much money. So every time we go to Target, you're not going to get, a toy or something, possibly because of that, but that Mom and I felt that it was extremely important to do this type of work, and that made a difference. And to get them to understand that notion of justice on one side isn't all there is to it, that there's nobility and value in everything. So kind of making sure that they understand that, kind of making that change is important. But it's always been, it's as important to me how I make my money that I make money. So be able to look at yourself in the mirror and know that you're trying to make positive changes, that you're doing what you believe is important, I think is invaluable. Waking up and being happy about what you do, or having pride in what you do, is a totally different thing than dreading going to work, or feeling like what you're doing is useless, or that you're a cog in the wheel. So you can't value the change that believing in what you do does for you. And I think everybody sees it. I think your family sees it. I think your friends and relatives see it. Of you knowing the importance of the work that you're trying to do. I get some questions sometimes from people about, who are thinking about going into law, or students. Some law professors will get people to call me. And I encourage people to go in, to prosecution. It's a great job. It's a great way to learn the system. And I encourage people to follow what their interest is. What led them to go to law school, what led them to be interested in that, and to follow that arena, that you can do that. But the important thing I try to get people to understand is that you can live and be happy no matter what you're doing. That a lot of people don't think, how can I survive on a public interest career? Can I be a public interest lawyer and be okay? And I try to explain to people that when I left law school and was, I think, making $27,000 a year legal aid, and my wife, who teaches in a college, she was very early on in that career, and I think our net income was probably around $50,000. To the time that I started to leave the DA's office, where our net income was probably $150,000 to $175,000, we didn't have that much more money at the end of the month. That you live off what you earn, and you can live off what you earn doing public interest work just fine. And you probably won't ever really notice a significant difference until you move to somewhere else. But the notion or the belief that you're going to go work in a big law firm and make lots of money and then stop and take a public interest job is something I really try to discourage people to do, because it's almost impossible to do. Because if you make $200,000 a year, you're going to have $200,000 a year debts. Your house is going to be worth that. Your car is going to be worth, and to move from that is very difficult. So I try to encourage people to think about what they want and to understand that you can do it. It's not a problem, but moving backwards is very difficult. So, in all things, I think you should do what you love and love what you do.